go.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is a recording of the ITERS 3 overview training. And ITERS stands for Infant Toddler Environment Rating Scale. And this is a training for those of you who work with infants and toddlers. If you are a family child care provider or a preschool-based employee, feel free to stay and listen. But the information that we will be providing today is specifically on infant toddler classrooms in a setting, in a center-based setting. So if you are a family child care provider, you can switch over and watch our recording, and it's called the FCC ERS 3 overview. So FICRS overview would be more appropriate for the family child care setting. So we appreciate you listening in to our recording today, and know that this is just for informational purposes. This is not for training credit. And we just want you to know who is going to be with you today as you watch this recording. I am Kristen Howard. I am the assessment manager for Great Start to Quality, and I will let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Hello, thanks for joining everyone. I'm Jennifer Roundtree, a consultant and trainer for Great Start to Quality.
Hello and welcome. I am Haley Norris. I am an assessor with Great Start to Quality, so I may be one of the faces that you will see come out to do your on-site observation.
Okay, so let's dive into some learning objectives for our time together today. These are what we have carved out for our goals. And so we hope this aligns with what you're wanting to learn about the ITERS 3 as well. We want you to become familiar with the Infant Toddler Environment Rating Scale 3rd edition tool. This will be a choice for on-site observation beginning February 1st, 2023. So familiar, not an expert, but the intent of this time together is to help you become comfortable with the tool, how it will be used during an on-site observation. And all of this aligns with recognizing those components of quality early learning environments, which we'll talk a little bit about why the quality piece is so important and how that will support your mission and work with the children and families within your setting as well. And so we will spend some time showing you how some of these updates will support the revisions coming soon to Great Start to Quality, February 1st, 2023. If you're watching this after February 1st of 2023, well, we've already revised. We have the newly reimagined Great Start to Quality. And so we will talk about how that looks in our updated system. And then, as always, we never want to leave you empty-handed. We know this is a journey. We know there's a lot of information coming your way, and that you're balancing this with all of your work and support for the children and families within your setting. So we want to give you some helpful resources to support you along the way. So we will share some resources. We will show you things on our website to support you, and we will provide ways to help you answer any remaining questions. And so look for all of that information to come. So let's start at the fundamental piece with this, why high quality is important. And if you look at these bullets on the right side of your slide right now, you're probably like, yeah, this is really important. I know this, right? You say, I advocate and live and breathe this. 90% of development happens between birth and 5 years of age. And if you're watching this recording, most likely you're working with infants and toddlers in a center. You're an administrator, an educator, an assistant teacher. Those are all pivotal, important pieces, right? That falls within that birth to 5 years. And so we know with Great Start to Quality's newly reimagined vision, mission, and values, we are really showing the importance of your work and the work that supports children and families. And so what does that give you? That gives 11,500 hours of potential learning, opportunities to spark excitement and learning, and knowing that children need those high quality settings. And so when we talk about the newly reimagined part of Great Start to Quality, we look at some key values. And so you see words such as equity, quality, empower, committed. These are essential pieces in reimagining Great Start to Quality. This is why the ITERS tool was chosen, to give you a choice. So when you have the opportunity for an on-site observation, you will get a choice. And so that should help you feel empowered. And when you feel empowered, that helps you with your work with children and families. And so putting this all together as we go through this tool today, as we talk about the items that will be observed, as we provide some resources and some insight in how the on-site observation process works, we really want this to feel as if it's an equitable process, that it supports quality within your childcare setting for children and families, that you feel empowered, that children and families feel empowered, and that you see the commitment that Great Start to Quality is making to support all of these pieces, knowing that birth to 5 years is so critical for supporting children in their learning and engagement. So let's talk a little bit about environment rating scale. As you see here, we shorten it to ERS 3. That 3 is for the 3rd edition, in ITERS, which is the Infant Toddler Environment Rating Scale 3rd edition. So when we first started this journey with thinking about revising Great Start to Quality, we focused solely on moving from PQA, Program Quality Assessment Tool, to Classroom Assessment Scoring System. I just threw a lot of words at you, but you probably definitely have heard PQA, and you probably might have attended a class training or listened online to one of our class recordings. So you know that class is going to be an option, but we felt like if we're really saying we're wanting to give educators a choice and to help them feel empowered, we need to give you more than one choice. And so environment rating scale was added as an option for on-site observation starting in February of 2023. And so there are 3 tools of the scale that we're going to use. And today we're going to focus on the infant toddler. As Kristen mentioned earlier, we have done our training for the Family Child Care Environment Rating Scale, or FICRS. You can find that on our website. We'll show you at the end of this recording. So if you're a family child care provider and you happen to stumble across this and you're listening in because you're thinking, well, I work with infants and toddlers, know that the FICRS tool is the one that will be used for you if you are a family child care provider. ECHRS, that will be coming. We haven't done that training yet, but that is for our preschool educators. So anyone working from children ages 3 to 5 years, they would get the ECHRS tool. And so today we're going to focus on the ITERS. So why were these tools chosen? Well, they are valid and reliable, research-based. They are similar, all 3 of the tools. The data is collected the same way and scored the same way, and Kristen's going to talk through that scoring process briefly with all of us. They are internationally normed, which means they're not only used within Michigan, well, soon to be in Michigan, but across the United States and the world. They provide options for providers to look at how you're balancing your interactions with your environment. And they have specific tools that will support not family child care, but will support infant toddler educators. And you will find these resources on the Environment Rating Scale page on our Great Start to Quality website, which we will show you soon. So know that these are added as an option for all of you. They are valid, research-based. They collect insight from infant toddler educators to put them together. So they're reviewed annually, and there's a lot of data to support the benefits of using them to promote high quality early childhood settings. So ultimately, it's all about high quality. That's the focus of Great Start to Quality, but tying in being equitable, showing our commitment, and helping to empower not only children and families, but all of you as educators in this journey together. So the blue book, the light blue book you see here, this is the ITERS scale, infant toddler. This is the focus for today's training. And some of these things I mentioned earlier, but really the scale collects ways that educators can improve their care and educational experiences for infants and toddlers. It does focus on adult-child interactions, just like the classroom assessment scoring system does, But the ITERS takes a little slightly different take on that. It's not just on the interactions, but it's on the environment and how those are used to support the children in the setting. And we'll break that apart today because we're going to spend some time diving in to the scale to tell you more about that. And this is drawn from health, development, and education fields. They collected data and they interviewed infant toddler educators to support the development of the scale. And they asked for their feedback too. So again, that ties into that research-based and valid and reliable piece for using this scale.
Great. Alrighty, so you've heard us talk about on-site observation, and while that will be a heavy focus of our time together today, we did want to touch base on this indicator that you're going to see here on your slide, because in the self-reflection portion of the new reimagined Great Start to Quality process, it's called the self-reflection. There are indicators. And one of the indicators is going to be completing a self-assessment using the ERS scales. So if you're an infant toddler educator, you will be using the ITERS 3 to be able to self-assess your program for this indicator. So we did put that indicator up there on the screen, CIL 11. The program has completed the Environment Rating Scale ERS 3, or the SEL PQA. That's for out of school time school agers, for every age group or classroom. So you will do this in the self-reflection portion of the process. So we did want to touch on that because it's not just about on-site observation. You will see ERS scales within the self-reflection as an indicator.
All right, so in these next few slides, we're going to be going over the terms that are used throughout the scale. If you have an ITERS book in front of you, the explanation of terms can be found on pages 11 through 14. If you don't have the book, that's okay. That's why we're here, to provide you with the information that we feel you should know. So the first term we're going to look at here is accessible. This is a word that you're going to see frequently used throughout all the ERS scales. Accessible means that during the observation, children can reach and use the required materials or equipment. A material simply being present in the classroom does not necessarily mean that it is accessible. For example, those would include materials in locked cabinets or extra materials you rotate out that you have in storage closets. Next here, we're going to take a look at the ages in an infant toddler classroom. So young infants are those children who cannot sit unsupported. Young infants are not required to have constant access to toys and materials due to their limited skills. However, some access to appropriate materials with staff assistance should be observed, even if those infants do not have access to every material. For older infants who can sit unsupported, access to more materials is required, so staff should either bring materials to the children or move the children to within reach of the materials. And then mobile children should be able to move freely in the space and have the ability to reach and access materials of their choice throughout the observation. One thing to note is, if mobile children who are awake and ready to play spend more than an hour of the observation in an outdoor space, then materials should be accessible both outdoors and indoors. Restrictive furnishings. So we're all aware that young children need more individualized treatment and may require more holding and cuddling, more soothing from staff, and placements in seats such as high chairs, cribs, or swings to help and calm and soothe them. While they may need to use these furnishings, even though the children may seem content, they should not be placed in these restrictive items for long periods of time. They should be taken out and held and soothed by staff as necessary, given access to a variety of materials throughout the day.
Thanks, Haley. So let's continue thinking about this explanation of terms So we're learning this common language of the scale to support you as you look at your scale book or when you choose to have this for an on-site observation. And I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful Haley used the word staff, which is really important to think about when the on-site observation happens. And to talk about this, all staff in the classroom setting will be observed. So thinking about those pieces as you incorporate this into your learning. And so let's look at the word lapse. Well, we're all familiar with that word lapse, right? It's an interval or passage of time. But what does this mean in terms of the ITERS 3? And why is this something important to be mindful of when you are interacting with children, setting up your classroom space and thinking about all those pieces? So we know that infants and toddlers can be busy, right? Sometimes you're feeling a little overwhelmed. You've got a lot going on. Your team, you're trying to get, your teaching team, you're trying to get everyone ready to go outside or get children get their teeth brushed or hands washed. But it's important to be mindful of what the child is doing if they have to wait for a long period of time during a transition or preparing for something. Just think about our winters here in Michigan, right? Trying to get all those kiddos dressed and ready to go outside. And then, especially if you're a toddler teacher, you're probably smiling and thinking, yep, we know what happens when we're trying to get our kids into their snow pants, and we've got a few that are just rolling around, and because they've been sitting there waiting for a long time, right? That would be considered a lapse. So thinking about activities or ways to keep children engaged, that they're not having to sit passively by while you're supporting other children. We recognize that sometimes children do need to wait for things, right? But it's the long period, that lapse, where then you start to see maybe some challenging behaviors occur, or children feeling disconnected. They start to wander off. You might see some outbursts, especially you might see this at mealtime if you're getting ready to serve snack and children have to sit at the table or in high chairs for a long time while you're preparing items. So thinking about, first off, how you can be prepared before this happens. So you're planning for those transitions or those meal times to make sure you have materials or their food prepared, whatever way that you can quickly have things helpful and convenient to support you, that then you can support those children within your classroom. To also thinking about if you're having to work directly with children and you've got several children you're trying to help, maybe you have a basket of books nearby they can watch, maybe you have a song that you play that they can sing, something that they can touch and manipulate, something to keep them engaged. So you're avoiding that long lapse of time. That's something important to be thinking about. So reflect on that. Take a look within your classroom setting. Look at those transition times. Look at those meal preparations or preparing to get children outdoors. Think if there's any lapse in there, and then talk to your teaching team or your administrator for some ideas and supports to lessen those for children. Not only is that going to benefit the children within your classroom, but it will benefit you and make things a little more smooth. Weather permitting, we definitely have to talk about weather here in Michigan. And so what does ITERS 3 say about weather permitting? Well, it's saying there is no public health warning due to temperatures that are too high or too low, such as active precipitation, such as rain or snow. And I really want to draw the emphasis on that word active. That's why I really paused and stretched that out a little bit. It's not just a little bit of rain or some sprinkles or some snow flurries. It's active, like a heavy downpour, whiteout conditions, high winds, any public health warning thinking about temperatures. So being mindful of the weather and knowing the benefits of getting children outdoors. Even infants and toddlers need time outside. It's good for their cognitive development. It's good for that engagement, those interactions. It's good to release stress. It's also beneficial for us as adults, right? Everybody needs to spend time outdoors. So if it might be raining in the morning when you normally take your children outdoors, think about a modification. Perhaps maybe you can get some time outdoors before you have lunch with children. Maybe it's after they wake up, you can get them. So thinking about, well, this is plan B. If we can't get out during our normal time, how might we modify our schedule, knowing the benefits of getting children outdoors, knowing that they need that experience and that time, and what can we do within our schedule to allow children to go outdoors safely. So just being thoughtful about that as well. As you can see, there's some real intentionality here with thinking about these terms in the ITERS scale. So lapse and weather permitting. And now we're going to look at this word engaged. So what do we mean when we're talking about engaged? Well, it's not just children sitting by being quiet and still. Engaged is that active interest, that children are paying attention, that the adults are connected as well. And so it's that serve and return opportunity that we have with infants and toddlers. So that how that might look indoors is maybe you're reading with a child, they're in your lap, you're pointing out words in a book, you're talking about that. You are engaged to help them be engaged. And then thinking about it outdoors as well. It's not just a time to passively sit by and let children kind of do their own thing. You are part of that learning process too. So, and then in that response, children will be engaged and they will start to learn and have fun and see the excitement in you. So really thinking about how engaged looks. It's not just sitting still, having a good attention, children that are quiet. It's that active learning that we want to see happening. Next, we're going to talk about ample. And so there's a couple of ways to look at ample. It's not just in terms of space, but it's also in materials as well. And here you go again, toddler teachers, right? We know what happens when you don't have ample space and materials, especially with toddlers and that sense of self-autonomy, right? I can do it, I want it, mine, right? But infants as well. We know that children need space to move around. Toddlers need to have the opportunity to move their bodies. Infants too, to explore safely. So thinking about your space and your layout, thinking about the maximum number of children that you could have that day. So even if you just have 2 children during that time, but you could potentially have 6, thinking of your space set up for 6 children, the maximum number that you could have. And then with materials, not only should you have them be well organized, and as Haley talked about, being accessible, but you should have ample materials. And that children know if you have a popular item and children tend to fight over it and they want it, right? Especially those toddlers, that you have ample materials so that they are able to use them, that they are able to stay engaged. A perfect example I think about with materials is blocks. Kiddos love the block space, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but thinking about how to support them so that they have enough space and materials, that they're not all crowded in, because not only is it beneficial for the children, it's supportive of you and your teaching as well.
Okay, so now you've heard a little bit about the explanation of all of the terms, and we're going to go over a little bit on how the scale itself is set up. And so we want you to understand this. While you don't need to memorize this information, it is very helpful for you to know when you have an on-site observation. That way you can fully understand the report as well. So ITERS 3 has 33 items, and they're organized into 6 subscales. Those subscales are space and furnishings, personal care routines, language and books, activities, interaction, and program structure. And each of those subscales are broken down into items, and then those items are broken further down into indicators. Again, as each thing is broken down, it becomes more specific. All right, so those, the ITERS 3, again, is broken down into these 6 subscales. You're gonna see that similar items are together within one group. It's kind of like chapters that you might find within a table of contents in a book. So it will make sense. And then those items are broken down into indicators, which are actual indicators of quality. Some of them are high indicators of quality, and some of them are lower indicators of quality. Again, if you have a scale book, this is taken directly from the book. And if you do not, you could pause here and reflect on the subscales and the items that are found in the ITERS 3 scale. All right, so now we're going to look a little bit about the display for children on this slide. So you're going to see display for children, number 4 here, and we will get into scoring a little bit later, but you'll see on the left-hand side that a 1 is inadequate, and you're going to see some indicators underneath that 1 section, all the way up to excellent, the 7 section, and things that would be found in an excellent section for display for children. Again, if you'd like to look at this in more detail, feel free to pause the recording and you'll be able to see what indicators are in the specific item for display for children. This is just one example. Within the ITERS 3, there are notes for clarification. And again, if you want to learn more about this tool, we are going to give you some resources at the end of our recording here today. But the Environment Rating Scales Institute, ERSI, the publishers, the authors of these scales, provide notes for clarification. And it clarifies the expectations for each of those items and indicators. It gives specific information about requirements for different ages, because with the infant and toddler, we know young infants are going to be doing things a little bit differently than, say, an older toddler. And it also gives examples of materials. So you'll see right on this slide here, a section from the ERSI website. And again, this is where the notes for clarification can be found for more information.
All right, well, thanks to Kristen for that scale structure overview. Now we're going to start diving into the subscales and items in the book. We're not going to dig too deep into each indicator, but rather just give a high-level overview of each item in the scale. So here is space and furnishings, which takes a look at the indoor space and its furnishings, the arrangement, and displays. So we're going to take a look at the indoor space used by children during the observation. The amount of space that the children have to use for their play is important because we know it influences the number and types of activities that children can effectively engage in at the same time. As Jen previously noted, assessors will be scoring the space based on the maximum number of children allowed to use the room at one time and on the adequacy of the space and furnishings for that number of children. The condition of the space is also important because it can affect the comfort and health of the children in care and the adults that work there. This includes the comfort it provides in terms of natural light, temperature, ventilation, and noise level. The space should also be in good repair and easy to maintain and clean. There should be evidence of daily cleaning of surfaces, including floors and tables. Furniture should be stable and in good repair. And generally, there should be no repair problems that present health and safety risks. Furnishings looks at the furniture used by the children for routine care, play, and learning activities. Basic furniture for routine care includes appropriately sized tables and chairs for toddlers and twos, very low accessible shelves, cribs and or cots with children's names on them, which are placed in the same spot each day. Individual storage for children's personal belongings, child-sized shelving for storing materials and toys, furniture that promotes self-help, and soft furnishings. If children with disabilities are observed, they should have the adapted furniture that they need. The arrangement of the indoor space used by the children affects how well staff can enhance children's learning and supervise them to protect their well-being. The arrangement of furniture and materials in a room organizes the play space for the children. Materials should be placed for easy access by children and should be organized by type for productive use. The provided space should allow different kind of play activities to go on at the same time. The arrangement of the space should allow for visual supervision of children. This means that staff should be able to hear and respond to problems quickly. Staff should be able to see most children by glancing around, and staff should be able to circulate through the space to check on the children who are out of view. The room should also be conveniently arranged. Staff should be able to carry out their work with the children with very few inconveniences. And children's cubbies should be of easy access for both staff and for parents. And lastly, here we're going to look at displays. The primary purpose for displaying materials within the space used by children is to extend the children's learning experiences. Displays should be located where they could easily see the content. These displays should be intentional and should include colorful, simple pictures, posters, mobiles, or other colorful three-dimensional hanging objects. You can display photographs of the children in their care. You can display their families and pets or other familiar faces. And whatever is displayed should really be at children's eye level. And make sure you're talking to the children about the displayed materials. Point out colors, shapes, or numbers. Talk about a child's family as they look at the photographs. Our next subscale is personal care routines. These items refer to the times when children are eating, toileting, or carrying out tasks related to those basic routine times. So children should be offered nutritious foods throughout the day. This we will see during meal times, snack times, etc. Milk should always be offered alongside solid food when children are eating a meal. It shouldn't be withheld until after or given to them before. Water should be offered to toddlers in between meal times, and meals should be pleasant for the children with appropriate teaching provided by the staff. There's 3 important health practices that are required in this item. These include that eating surfaces are washed and sanitized, hand hygiene is occurring before and after eating, and making sure that foods served are uncontaminated. So diapering and toileting looks at the basic sanitary procedures, as well as diaper and toileting schedule and proper supervision. Proper sanitizing requirements include proper hygiene after diapering and toileting for both the children and staff. It includes keeping the diapering area clean and disinfected, and making sure that the diapering toileting sinks are separate from the sinks used for other purposes. If you happen to only have one sink in the classroom, which is used for multiple purposes throughout the day, just making sure that it's sanitized, say after diapering and toileting use, before it's being used for meal preps. And it's also important to make sure that diapering and toileting is individualized according to the children's needs. We all use the bathroom at different times of the day, so children should really be checked periodically for diaper change, and not necessarily all changed on the same schedule. Health practices here looks at the general health and nap-related issues. Much effort should be made to decrease the spread of germs. So space and furnishings should be clean. Mouth toys should be removed before being placed back into play. Noses should be wiped when needed. And hand hygiene should be appropriately carried out as needed. Remember to always be a good model of health practices and help the children learn how to properly carry out hygiene practices by providing positive teaching interactions during health-related practices. Count to 20 when washing hands or sing a song related to hand washing when you're helping teach those older infants and toddlers how to properly hand wash. Lastly is safety practices. So the intent of this item is to lower the risk of injury of children by minimizing hazards and providing adequate supervision for the age and ability of children in the group. During the observation, both indoor and outdoor safety hazards will be considered. So there's 3 types of hazards that are looked for in the ERS tools. An extreme safety hazard is one which poses an immediate threat to the life and safety of the children. A major safety hazard, this is one where the risk of serious injury is very high. And a minor hazard is either one where the consequences would not be great or an accident is not likely. So obviously the spaces used by the children should really be set up to avoid safety problems. Make sure you're giving children simple explanations as to why they cannot do unsafe actions. So remind the children, if you have a toddler running, just make that comment that, oh, it's not safe to run in our classroom because I don't want you to fall. And always make sure that staff supervision is adjusted based on the relative risks and behavior of the children. Coordinate your activities to ensure that all children are adequately supervised visually. All right, language and books is our next subscale. There's a lot to this one, so just bear with me here. So we know talking with children builds language and communication skills. You can talk with children anytime, anywhere, and about anything. There should be frequent informal talking with children throughout the observation during both play and routines. Personalize the talk with children with one-on-one conversations. Use the child's name, make eye contact, talk about what you're doing with the children or what they may be doing or are interested in. And talk in a playful way. Babble with the babies. You could teach finger plays to toddlers. Use rhymes or chants or songs. Encouraging vocabulary development. So we know that it's important to encourage vocabulary development in young children so that they can develop their own language and literacy skills. Staff should use a wide range of words appropriate to the ages and abilities of the children in their care. Use specific names for people, places, things, actions, and descriptive words as children experience them in routines and play. Talk about what you're doing. Label and or describe what the children are looking at or playing with. Point out classroom materials or displays. And make obvious comparisons and contrasts to help children understand words. This could be using the words big and small. It could be using the names of 2 separate colors. Responding to children's communication builds and strengthens relationships between children and their caregivers. So in order to respond to children's communications, the provider must frequently be close enough that children can communicate easily. So staff should respond to both verbal and nonverbal communication from the children. Response to children's communication should always be positive. Show interest in the children's communication and respond to them. Say words that the children may be trying to communicate. And if you have verbal children, add more words or ideas to expand on what the children are trying to say. Encourage children to communicate. So conversations and questions should be used with children of all ages, even young infants. We know that verbal and nonverbal turn-taking will occur. And most conversations and questions initiated by infants will be nonverbal. This could include the widening of baby's eyes or waving of their arms or legs. Staff should initiate conversations with children during both routines and play. And questions should be meaningful and personal to the children and give those children time to respond. We know that the nonverbal children won't be responding to you by talking, but it may just be a smile or a coo. Staff use some books with children. So we know that using books with children helps to develop a close and enjoyable relationship with books. In order to develop an interest in books, books should be interesting to the children, and staff and children should be actively engaged in the use of books. So staff should use books formally and informally, and book times should be pleasant. Read aloud with the children, encourage them to help you turn the pages, follow the printed words with your finger as you read the book, show interest and enjoyment in books, laugh or smile at appropriate times in a story, show enthusiasm when talking about pictures. use different voices for different characters. Just always make sure that those book times are attractive to the children. And if they aren't interested, it's okay. They can leave. And then lastly, encouraging children's use of books. So books should be accessible throughout the day and should be age appropriate for the children in care. A variety of books should be accessible to all children. They should be within easy reach and use and not crowded on a shelf or in a big pile. It should be easy for the children to see the title page. For non-mobile infants, place books on the floor within the children's reach. Always give positive attention to those children that choose to use books independently. Provide positive interactions when children use books on their own. And make sure you're rotating your books to relate to current season themes or just interests of the children.
Thanks, Haley, for that overview on those subscales. We're going to move into our next subscale, which is activities. And as Haley mentioned, this is a lot. Kristen shared earlier with us, this is a recording, so feel free to pause and take notes. If you need a minute to process all of this, you can listen to this recording as many times as you want. But let's dive into activities. Before we go into the activities that I'm going to share next, a few things, and you probably heard Haley say this as she was going through her subscale items. You're picking up on some of those explanation of terms, those common terms within the ITERS scale. And so I'm going to call them out because I'm going to sound like a broken record here for a little bit. We're talking about accessible with all of these activities. How are they accessible? That's something for you to really keep in mind as an infant, toddler, educator, administrator. We're talking about how you talk to and with children during these activities. So you're not passively sitting by, but you're talking, you're engaging. That word engagement comes into play here, that serve and return, right? And the use, when you are talking, it should be frequently, not occasionally, not sometimes, but it's part of your regular practice. So keep those in mind as we talk about these activities and go through them. So I'm going to pull them all up here because there's several of them, and Kristen's going to go through, oopsie, there we go, I got it here, go through some of these as well. We're going to start with fine motor, so I'm going to move on to the next slide, but we're going to talk through these briefly. Again, if you're in your scale book and you don't need to have it, all of these examples we're giving are called out. I'm going to be starting on page 45 with fine motor. And so let's talk about this and how this looks for infants and toddlers. We know that infants and toddlers need access to fine motor experiences. So for infants, these could be grasping toys, busy boxes, cups, nested cups, containers to fill and dump, textured toys, cradle gyms are considered for toddlers and older children. So remember, this is up to 2 years. If a child is 3 years or older, we would be looking at the ITERS, which is the early childhood. So we're thinking about large stringing beads, big pegs with pegboards, simple puzzles, pop-up beads. So having at least 5 or more different choices that are accessible to children so they're able to reach them. You don't have to go to a locked cabinet or pull them off a shelf for them, but they're easy for them, accessible, that you are engaged with children during these experiences. There's that serve and return, those conversations are happening. You're talking about how a child might be using the material, asking probing questions, what could they do next? Thinking about how things are organized, right? When we talked about ample space and materials, there's ample materials here, but the space is organized. It's comfortable for children to use these materials. They're not cramped. They're not all crowded in. And you'll notice in the scale book too, that sometimes you might see something under an item that says observe once or observe for 2 different children, but let's hold on to that for a second. The key with these experiences is that it's part of your regular practice. This is something that happens consistently. So if you find motor experiences, they're consistent within your classroom and children are able to use them. You're asking children questions, you're making comments about them. So that talking piece and that frequent talking is happening as well. Moving on to art. Art materials are available, so there's at least one drawing material accessible if you have children 24 months or older throughout the observation, or that's just best practice to have art materials accessible to children. Again, you're talking to children about their art experience. You might do some dictation, like, tell me, what did you draw? And I'm going to write it down. Would you like to title your painting? So you're having that serve and return, right? The materials are organized. You're part of the process too. And Haley mentioned this, we're not forcing children to do these activities. If a child is not interested in the art experience, that they have an alternative activity available to them. And you're teaching children art concepts as you're going through. You're talking about, this is the paintbrush. If you're introducing clay with children, maybe you're mixing colors and you're talking about that experience, right? So again, there's that engagement piece happening. You're showing them how to properly use and care for art materials, that extensive conversation with them. You're doing some dictation about their art, and you're displaying that. Their art is part of that classroom setting. So when a family comes in, or if a child wants to show someone their art that they created, that they're able to point it out, that it's at their level, and they can take pride in that, right? Or you're sending that home, sending pictures to families. So really thinking about how to incorporate that art experience. And especially with those youngsters, when they're using art materials, you're very attentive. There's that close supervision. You're being really mindful. And again, that proper care of the materials, and you're taking time to introduce them to how to use them as well and how to store and care for them. Music and movement is very important as well, right? So this is part of this accessible piece, that you have music instruments accessible to children. So thinking of maybe having at least 10 music instruments accessible throughout the children. Again, children are not required to participate in a group music activity if they're not interested. There's an alternative activity accessible to them. You're showing them how to use the instrument properly. You're talking about features of music. So maybe you're pointing out rhyming words in a song. Maybe you're talking about tempo. Maybe when you're dancing with children, you're showing them different ways to dance, and you're talking about that, and you're participating as well. There's some time for just free song, right? Maybe you just sing a song with children while they're washing hands, or as you're getting ready to go outside, or you're on a nature walk, you're singing with children. Maybe there's an opportunity to do some finger plays. And maybe you have children that have language other than the primary language in your classroom setting. And so you're introducing that child's language through song. That's a great way to introduce that within your classroom setting. That they're pleasant experiences, that they're not forced and manipulated. It's not trying to corral everybody in, but it's very pleasant. And here's another thing about music and movement to keep in mind. If you have background music going, it does not interfere with any other activity. And so just being mindful, if you are playing any background music, that it's not overwhelming, it doesn't overstimulate children. So it's very intentional in that use as well. We're continuing through the sub-skill of activities. There's a lot of them as we saw. So let's take a moment here to think about blocks. Again, being accessible, making sure there's enough blocks for the maximum number of children within your classroom setting, that there might be an interest center for blocks. So thinking about how the blocks are organized, that they're of good quality, that children are able to reach them. There's enough space for children to build with blocks, that they have a secure space, so they're not trying to build on a fluffy rug and their block structures keep falling down. But maybe there's a hard floor or a table that they can use the blocks on, that there possibly could be some accessories that they can add to their block structures while they're building, especially for those toddlers and 2-year-olds that you might have. And again, that you're having conversation with children about how they're using the blocks, what ideas they might have for the blocks, that you're modeling how to create some structures, especially for those young toddlers or older infants, that this might be their first time exploring with blocks. You're thinking about those pieces. Dramatic play is another activity we're going to look at through here and see how this looks with the ITERS scale. So you have many and varied appropriate dramatic play materials that are accessible. And so what does that mean, right? That they are plentiful, that they're easily observed, and that they represent all different types. So you're thinking about with infants, perhaps you have some soft dolls, soft animals, pots and pans, toy telephones, small people, toy foods, toy animal figurines, vehicles, hats, maybe some purses within your setting for those older infants, toddlers and 2-year-olds, some simple dress-up clothes, child-sized house furniture, cooking and eating equipment, so pots and pans, dishes, some accessories, dolls, doll furnishings, soft animals, play buildings with accessories, toy telephones. There's a whole list of dramatic play materials that you might be able to have. So thinking about that many and varied. And then dress ups, if you have toddlers, that you have dress ups within that setting. So hats and purses, that they're not all the same, that you're thinking of not gender exclusive dress ups. So you're thinking not just having, you know, all princess things, but you're thinking of maybe a construction hat or a police officer's vest. Ways to really also with dramatic play items support the diversity within the children in your setting. You're thinking about different cultures being represented, so it's not just one. And you're also, and Kristen will talk about this when she talks about diversity, that you're thinking about children or people with disabilities being represented as well within those dress up and dramatic play materials, and that you're frequently joining in, that you're having conversation, you're showing children how to use the dramatic play materials, you're participating in their play, you're following their lead and their interest. If you see that children are really interested in something specific within the dramatic play, maybe you put in some play sushi or something in their chopsticks and they're having like a fun time with that, maybe thinking about how to incorporate more to support them with that interest as well. And for those of you that teach toddlers, that you're thinking about how dramatic play can be used outdoors. So maybe it's a basket you have by the door and you take out with you with some dramatic play materials in it, so they can have that experience outdoors as well, is very important. All right, nature and science. How might this look with the ITERS scale for those of you working with infants and toddlers? Again, it's accessible, and we're not just talking about outdoor accessibility to nature and science, but how that might look indoors. Children need to have opportunity to see nature indoors as well. And that if you are an infant teacher, you're thinking about the importance of getting your infants outdoors. So how do you take the infants outdoors? How do you get them engaged? Maybe you put a blanket on the grass and maybe you put the infants under a tree, or maybe it's a nature walk with some time looking around at different scenery and commenting, having conversation. Again, that talking piece about the nature for children. Maybe you have a window in your classroom and you point out some birds, or you have a tree by your window and you talk about the change in the tree. Maybe it's a windy day and you talk about how the wind is blowing. Maybe you notice some dew on the grass or some fog in the morning, any of those interesting weather things, and you're talking to the infants and toddlers about those. You have science materials in your classroom. Maybe you have a class pet. Maybe you have bubbles out for children and you're talking about, oh, wow, I wonder what makes those bubbles. How do they expand? How can you make a bigger bubble? So thinking about that, perhaps you have some sand and water play. And if you do sand and water play, that it's closely supervised, and you're being mindful of how the children are using those materials. Perhaps you have some pictures or photographs in your classroom of nature or science events, and you're talking to children. You have some books about nature and science. There's all sorts of ways you can incorporate it. But again, the key takeaway with this item in this subscale is, how is it accessible, not only outdoors, but indoors? How are you having conversation about it with children? And in that frequent conversation, that how that looks for children to be engaged and how you are engaged as staff with the children, supporting them in that. Okay, let's go to math and number. And so again, thinking about that accessible piece. So what what opportunities do you have for infants and toddlers when talking about math and numbers? So maybe you're talking about shapes. Maybe you're doing some counting activities with them. Maybe as you serve snack, you're having children count the number of goldfish on their napkin. Maybe you do some number songs or chants. Maybe you introduce some nursery rhymes or finger plays. And so you're having those experiences with those children. Maybe you ask a child, how old are you going to be tomorrow? And the child says 3, and you say, I wonder 3, how might that look? And you have them hold up 3 fingers and you count, or you hold up 3 fingers and they count with you. Perhaps you're using some math words in conversations with children, especially if you're working with toddlers and you're talking about sequencing. So you might say something like, well, first we're going to put on our coats, and second, then we'll put on our gloves or our mittens, and you're talking about those pieces. Maybe you have some counting books within your classroom setting. Maybe you have some puzzles that they can count. You're counting objects with children as you count. Maybe you're talking about smallest and biggest as you refer to objects. There's all sorts of ways to incorporate math and number with infants and toddlers, thinking about what's developmentally appropriate, thinking about the frequency of it and your engagement as well, and how that is accessible to those children to support them in learning those concepts.
All right, now we're going to talk about appropriate use of technology. So this is one item that can be scored in NA. We don't have to score this one at all if there is no technology used at all. Now, when we talk about technology, we're talking about all audiovisual devices. So things you might not think about right off the top of your head would be like a tablet to play music. If you are showing a little video with the music, that would count, and we would score appropriate use of technology. However, in an instance, maybe you're using a tablet to play music, but you're putting it face down and the children cannot see anything with it. You're simply using that just to play a song, then that would not be counted. But if there is any sort of screen that the children can see, whether it's intentional or not intentional, then we would score appropriate use of technology. But we can just score this NA if there is no technology being used. So a couple of things that we want to talk about. Technology in terms of audiovisual devices should not be used with children under 2. So these devices should not be used at all. And that is one area that would be scored down if these types of materials are used with children under the age of 2. And then we need to talk about appropriateness. If any sort of technology is being used, we obviously want to make sure that it's age appropriate. It should not include any violence at all or any antisocial behavior. And one thing I want to point out in this particular section is to definitely be pre-screening what you're showing to the children, because we all know that ads pop up even on sites that are meant for children, and a lot of those ads can be inappropriate, and that would be an item that would be scored down. Again, we talk about accessibility, right? There should be accessible activities that are an alternate to that technology. So 3, in fact, alternate activities should be accessible to the children if they don't want to participate with the screen time or that use of technology time. It should never go over 20 minutes with this particular age group of children. And really, one of the things that we really want to point out is if you're going to use technology, that the staff is really involved with the children using technology. It's not turning on a game or a little finger play song and leaving the child to just view that by themselves. It's really a staff member being an active participant during that time and helping the children use that appropriate technology. Again, this does not have to be scored. If there is no technology used, we will simply NA this particular item and move on. All right. Now we're going to talk about promoting acceptance of diversity. So we know that promoting diversity in early childhood is best practice. To give credit for diversity materials, we will need to observe that children can easily see what is represented. So think about your youngest infants and maybe your older toddlers, right? Things are going to look a little bit differently. And we've been talking about this through the entire recording today, that these things need to be accessible. So in order for an infant to have diverse materials be accessible, you're going to have to bring those things right to the infant so that they can easily touch them and see them. You're going to see some things on your screen, and these are just ideas. We do not expect that you run out and purchase any of these items. We would never do that. However, think about what you already have or things that you can be creative with. These are just some examples of books, posters, babies, dramatic play materials, right? Different foods. This is just a sample of some things that we might find in your room to represent diversity. So also think about your diverse materials in terms of taken out and actually used and extending that time with the children. Not just having it on a shelf or stuffed where the children can't see, but again, actively, intentionally engaged in the diverse materials within your setting. So again, we're looking for images and books. We're looking for easily visible displays. As Jen mentioned earlier, music played from a variety of cultures. That's a wonderful way to get different diversity materials, even some different musical instruments from diverse cultures in your program, foods, dolls, dress-ups. The list goes on and on. I know this is one area where folks tend to get stuck sometimes, and it's a little easier than you might think. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about gross motor, and we talked about it way at the beginning when we talked about outdoor time and weather permitting and all of that. But we want to really point out those provisions for active physical play. We want to make sure that children have enough space and developmentally appropriate materials and equipment so they can be active and develop those gross motor skills. Again, you're going to see some samples here, and Haley's going to go into a little bit more about gross motor and the supervision of gross motor, but this really just talks about that opportunity for the children to have from the very youngest of infants through the oldest of toddlers, making sure that they have space and materials that they can freely move their muscles and really explore using their whole entire body. So I am going to pass it off to Haley, and she's going to talk about interactions, and part of that is during gross motor play.
Thanks, Kristen. So Jen touched base, and so did Kristen actually, on interactions as they relate to the specific activities and materials. Here we're going to look at the interactions as it relates to supervision, those peer-to-peer interactions, as well as staff and child interactions, physical warmth and touch, and guiding children's behavior. So supervision of gross motor play is considered both in the classroom and the outdoor space. Children should be allowed to move freely both indoors and outdoors. Help children develop new skills and use more challenging equipment. This can be providing support for a baby wanting to pull up to stand, holding a child's hand to help with walking. It can be helping your twos learn how to ride a tricycle outside. Always make sure that staff supervises children carefully to protect their safety and to avoid injury. If children are using climbing equipment within the classroom, Sit close by in case there is a tumble or a fall. Same goes for outside. And always encourage children's gross motor play. This can be as simple as playing music for mobile children to move and dance to, or placing those non-mobile babies on their tummies and placing a toy just outside their reach. Supervision of play and learning, non-gross motor. So supervision should be adjusted appropriately for the different abilities of the children. And staff should really act to avoid problems among the children before they occur. Show interest and appreciation for what the children do. And staff should really initiate activities or experiences for the children, as well as allowing them to play on their own. So peer interactions, those are those interactions among the children. Staff should really help facilitate children's attempts to interact with each other throughout the day. We know that infants and toddlers are curious little creatures. Talk about their actions, intentions, or feelings to other children. Initiate some opportunities for children to work or play together. Encourage if you have a multi-age infant toddler classroom, encourage one of your older toddlers to sit and read a book with one of the non-mobile babies. And always make sure to talk about those positive social interactions among children or between your staff and children. Make comment if you notice a toddler waving to another child as they arrive in the morning. Staff-child interactions. This includes both verbal and nonverbal communications between the staff and children. Positive individual interactions should occur with all children in the group throughout the observation. Staff should be understanding, soothing, and supportive with children, and should be sensitive to children's nonverbal cues. Show playfulness and appropriate humor with the children. And always remember to remain patient, calm, and cheerful, and to keep a relaxed and pleasant atmosphere. We know it can be tricky if you have many non-mobile infants in your care, but the more relaxed and calm you stay, the more relaxed and calm the babies will be. Provide physical warmth and touch. Hug, hold, rock, pat, and give children access to snuggle you. Make sure you're varying your physical touch to match the moods, personalities, or preferences of the children. Hug those children that you know are receptive. Be gentle with a child who may be upset. Always encourage those gentle touches among the children, especially when or if children are being rough. We know that those toddlers can get pretty handsy. Make yourself physically accessible to the children and be receptive of their attempts to initiate physical contact. Sit on the floor with the children, let them crawl into your lap. I've been in many infant toddler classrooms where teachers have kind of let the children use them as a jungle gym. It's a great way to encourage gross motor. And then guide children's behaviors. Staff should positively guide the children. Give children attention when they're behaving well. Help the children become aware of how their actions affect others. Always make sure that your expectations for the children are age appropriate. The children should be watched closely and redirected promptly. And always explain in simple terms the reasons why you cannot permit specific behaviors. For example, let the children know that hitting hurts. And always help the children use communication to solve their problems and follow up as needed. If there's a problem between two children, verbally discuss that problem with them. We know that they probably won't have the words to use to problem solve, but that's why you're there, to kind of guide them through the process. Our next slide here, we're going to look at program structure. So a schedule is the sequence of events experienced by the children during the observation, and a transition is the time spent between different activities. The daily schedule should meet the needs of the children, and the staff should adjust the schedule to meet those varying needs. Staff should always be prepared for the next activity. The children should not have to wait for providers to get materials out. They shouldn't have to sit in high chairs and wait for lunch to be prepared. Things should be ready on time. And then transition should be smooth with little waiting times. If children do have to wait for more than 3 minutes, alternate materials and activities should be accessible. This is kind of where that term lapse comes in that Jennifer spoke about in the beginning of the recording. Free play occurs when children are permitted to select materials and companions as much as possible and to play independently if needed. Free play can occur indoors and outdoors. And staff involvement is primarily a response to a child's specific need. And although staff can initiate activities for children to use, it should really be based on the children's interests. Make sure there's ample and varied materials for all ages of the children in the group. I know we spoke about this earlier. And staff should both supervise and interact with the children during free play. Show the children how to use and enjoy the materials, and use a wide variety of words to expand children's knowledge during free play. And lastly, group play activities. These are staff initiated, and it has the expectation of all children participating. However, as mentioned in the activity section, if children aren't interested in the group activities, make sure you have other materials accessible to the children to join in. Activities done in group time should be age appropriate, engaging, and popular for all children involved. And be flexible and adjust the activity as children join or leave the group. You could have a really great dance or music activity planned, but you may notice that the children, they're not engaged. It's okay. You can end the activity. You don't need to force the children to sit there and participate. And as I just mentioned, always make sure that other activities are accessible for those children who aren't participating or engaged during that group time.
All righty. So that was a lot to digest. And again, we just can't reiterate this enough. If you want to pause and take some notes, if you want to rewind the recording a little bit and listen to a section again or rewatch the whole thing, that is the beauty of a recording. You can go ahead and do that. We are going to move forward now with the scoring of the ITERS 3. And this is going to be kind of on a high level. We're not going to get into the weeds too much, but just some basic principles. So it's important that you understand some basic principles around ERS scoring so that you can think about quality improvement so that you are not discouraged maybe if you see a lower score on some items. Remember, this scoring is new to Michigan. This is a new tool and it's different than the PQA. Maybe you are very familiar with PQA scoring, or maybe this is all brand new to you. This scoring is based on a scale of 1 to 7, and you'll see that 7-point scale here. 1 as inadequate, 3 as minimal, which is basic health and safety requirements, 5 as good, which is developmentally appropriate, and 7 as excellent, enhanced development care. So each item then is scored on a scale of 1 to 7 based on the observed indicators. And then the subscale score is an average of those item scores of that subscale. And the total score is the sum of all the item scores for the entire scale divided by the number of items scored. And again, this is a pretty high level. You don't need to remember all of these things, but it is helpful, especially when you get your report from having an on-site observation. All right, so remember, not all 33 items might not all get scored. You can get an A, for example. Remember, I talked about appropriate use of technology. That's one area that can be NA. So it might not be exactly 33. All right. So for Michigan and our reporting purposes, the 1 to 7 scale is as follows. 1 is inadequate. 2 and 3 is minimal. 4 and 5 is good. And 6 and 7 is excellent. And you're going to see the columns here. These columns represent a level of quality. A level 1 means that those children might be at risk. The risk may be one that threatens health or safety, or it might be something that threatens their cognitive or social emotional well-being. So I'd like to just compare the scoring here to some ice cream. This is a really fun, easy way for you to understand the scoring. At a 1 level, it's an empty bowl waiting to be filled. So really your bowl is there and it's just waiting for something. That would be in the 1 inadequate level. And then up to the 3, the minimal level, it's a plain cone, maybe a little bit of vanilla soft serve. There's just a little bit there. It tastes good, but it's pretty minimal. And then at a 5, it's a delicious triple scoop on a sugar cone or a waffle cone. It's delicious. It's wonderful, but it's not quite up to that sundae level. And at the 7 level, the excellent level would be that banana split. Lots of flavors and sauces and whipped cream and a cherry on top. So really thinking about all of those levels of ice cream is a good way to think about how you're building upon the quality here for the ERS tools. And so really think of that level 7 like climbing Mount Everest. It's a rewarding climb, but very few get to the top. So while you may want to have scores of all 7s, it's really not realistic to have a score of all 7s. We're working towards average scores of a 5. And so you might have some items that score 6s or 7s, but you also will have some items that might score 1s or 2s. So really thinking of the big picture and how to incorporate these scores for true quality improvement. So those areas, those items that might have a lower score, really thinking about how you can work to create some goals to increase your quality improvement. Alrighty, so again, programs must score a 5 or above to reach demonstrating quality. So remember I said we're aiming for that level, that score of a 5. And briefly here, you will see the process for Great Start to Quality. Again, depending on when you're watching this launches in February of 2023. And more information is on our website. This particular graphic is on our website. And you will see demonstrating quality here. And it says meets the threshold score during on-site observation. So to get to that demonstrating quality level, every classroom that's observed must score at a 5 or above to reach that demonstrating quality level. Great.
All right, so here we're going to just do a quick little chat about the on-site observation process. So similar to before, if you had a PQA, you'll receive a phone call or an email from the assessor as your program is assigned, introducing ourselves and confirming your window and your blackout days. This will be an unannounced visit. So make sure you talk with your children about the upcoming visit so they're aware that a new person will be coming into the classroom. And when your assessor arrives, please introduce the assessor to the children so they know that we're not strangers. We will need to arrive when the majority of the children have already arrived for the day. There's no more need to see arrivals. We're going to gather some basic information for you before the observation begins. This will include the number of children enrolled, the ages of the children present, the max number of children that you can have each day, and the birth dates of the youngest child enrolled and the oldest child enrolled. This is a 3-hour observation. There is no interview at the end to gather information of what was not observed, so there will be no more clarifying questions asked. Outside time is observed. We're going to be prepared for the weather, so please don't decide to not go outside because it's cold out or it's snowing or it's raining, we'll have winter coats, we'll have umbrellas, gloves, hats. If many of us, when we go to the UP, we bring our snow pants, our snow boots, we'll be ready. We're gonna try to be a fly on the wall. We know it can be hard, especially we know toddlers love new faces in the classroom. So we're gonna try to stay out of the way. We will peek at materials when we can get to them. We're gonna watch interactions. We'll be taking lots of notes. We may acknowledge the children if they come to us to initiate something, but we're not there to play. So we'll just kind of make it a quick little interaction and we might just move away from them. And when finished, we'll quietly, hopefully without disruption, let you know that we're done before we head out.
Okay, so you've heard a lot of wonderful information today about the ITERS 3 tool. And again, can't stress enough, you do not have to have the scale book. However, it is very useful as you go on this journey. If the ITERS is the tool for you, it would be helpful to either purchase the book or borrow that from your local Great Start to Quality Resource Center. They're a great resource for you, and those lending libraries do have some of the scale books that you can borrow. So that is one definite huge resource for you. As you're navigating, you found our recording today. So you've been on our website and you've been able to find this recording, but know that we do have an ERS webpage with plentiful information, lots of links of where you can get more information, including the scale, including a link to the ERSI website, as I had mentioned previous in this recording about the Institute. There's a link right there. And just know that we are constantly adding things to our website. The website has a new look. It is Great Start to Quality. Just spend some time really navigating through the Great Start to Quality website. But in particular, this ERS webpage will give you a lot of information specifically to not only ITERS 3, but all of the ERS scales. Again, today we thank you for watching this recording. If you are able to find this recording, we invite you to really share it with your networks. The more folks find out about where to find the information, the better. So if you are involved in maybe a professional organization or some local organization that you can maybe share the information on this recording and the ERS webpage, that would really help us a lot. Again, can't stress enough that your local Great Start to Quality Resource Center will help you navigate through this entire process. And with that, I will turn it over to Haley.
Yes, we thank you all for attending this recording. Hopefully it was not too overwhelming for you. Best part is you can pause, you can go back at any time. Like Kristen said, please reach out with any further questions you may have. The assessment email inbox is always open. That is assessment@ecicforkids.org. And thanks again.